The Detroit Pistons have the number 5 pick in the upcoming NBA draft, but that may not be the only pick they leave with. Is there a possible trade that they could be making in the mid picks, somewhere in the late teens, mid teens, that could get Troy Weaver another lottery pick? And what are some prospects that the Pistons could take with one of those picks? We'll talk about that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Arcade 1UP. Bring home a slam dunk. Introducing NBA JAM Shaq Edition from Arcade 1UP. Pre-order now to play with legends. Arcade 1UP is the place for authentic gaming experiences featuring licensed retro games from the golden age of arcades. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. We're on our way to 3,000 subscribers. Continuing to show Locked On that we're the best and fastest growing fan base at the Locked On Network. So again, if you want to find the best way to support the podcast, Locked On Pistons YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. For today's podcast, we are bringing on friend of the podcast. He's been on many times. Hal, thank you for coming on, dude. We're going to be talking about obviously draft stuff. I told you guys that Hal is our featured draft guy. He's basically our draft beat guy, whatever. And we've talked enough about the number 5 overall pick. We've talked about it nonstop. I've had episodes talking about multiple different prospects, but something I've told you guys that we had coming for a minute now, and it's been a while, but with 10 days ago, I guess this is the perfect time to go ahead and talk about it, is
10 days, man. Holy cow.
It went by fast, dude. It's going by. But possible picks or prospects that the Pistons could be getting after 5, because it sounds like that the Pistons could be going after another first-round pick. Obviously, the most popular way is through Jerami Grant. And one of the prospects I've been telling you guys that I've been wanting to talk about on here, and we're going to spend the whole first segment talking about, is Jalen Duren. So, Hal, just real quick, before we dive into any specifics, I'm going to start off with giving you what the Ringer compares him to, and then you can take it away and tell us some overall thoughts about him, and then we can get in some details about him offensively, defensively, his future ceiling, floor, etc. So the Ringer compares him to DeAndre Jordan and Robert Williams. They have him ranked as their 11th ranked prospect. So what are your thoughts on Jalen Duren, who is out of Memphis?
Yeah, I think those are kind of your standard comparisons. Your Andre Drummond's right in that range, right? So just a little bit maybe undersized from a pure height perspective, massive wingspan. He's probably, I don't know if he measured at the combine. I haven't checked yet, actually. That's my bad. But probably about a 6'10". I think he's been at a 7'5" wingspan for a while. 250 pounds was what he was listed at. So, not like a true 7-footer, but a really big, strong, powerful kid. And he's still 19, I think. Really young. One of the youngest players in this draft. So you've got all the makings there of, just a firecracker pick and roll guy, right? A real rim threat who just needs a lot of fine tuning. I think it's the big question about Duren is there's all this potential, but no real set skill yet. I mean, he's kind of in that range that very similar to Pistons fans will remember young Andre Drummond, where like even the whole like screening and figuring out how to get angles, like the talent to catch the ball and slam it through the hoop is there. What happens, to get him that role, right? Is he going to make the most of those opportunities? There was a lot of mess, especially early on in his film. He got a lot better, I think, as the season went on, especially once the Amani Bates thing cleared up. But really he's not giving you much offensively other than that roll threat. And he's actually kind of a sneaky good passer. And then defensively, it's kind of the same way where it's like, this guy could be an awesome, drop defender, a great rim protector, but he's got happy feet and he's got to do a lot, of practicing and learning when it comes to kind of the spacing and that drop defense, right? Everybody remembers how long it took Andre Drummond to figure out, exactly how far back to drop and when he needs to come up and all that stuff. Those are all lessons that Duren's going to have to learn as well.
All right, so I'm glad you brought up Andre Drummond. I'm sure Pistons fans listening to this probably aren't happy you brought up Andre Drummond. But either way, when I was reading about him over the last few weeks, literally the player that came to my head most was Andre Drummond because of what they were saying about him. A guy who can be an immediate lob threat, is a really good athlete, can finish around the rim. A lot of things say that he's a strong finisher around the rim. You throw him anything around there, he's going to catch the ball. And they also talked about how he's a sneaky good passer from the elbows, and it shows potential to be a guy who can kind of, run some DHOs or make some nice passes, backdoors, kind of things from the elbow. And the player I thought of that did that was, that sounds like a lot of things that Andre Drummond did with the Pistons. And then also, like you mentioned, with the raw prospect, he's going to slip a little bit. He has a lot of raw skills, a lot of that kind of thing, but has to be really developed and has to really sharpen those skills. And again, that just reminds me of what I heard about Andre Drummond on draft night when the Pistons took him at 9. So he may not be the perfect comp, but that's literally where my mind went immediately when I was reading about him over the last few weeks. Is Andre Drummond. This sounds exactly like what I heard when the Pistons drafted him. Do you think that he would be a good fit with what the Pistons have going right here? You know that I've been a major proponent of please attack the 5 position. Please get a lob threat. Please get a vertical threat. That's not a complete liability defensively. Like Bagley, he can catch lobs, but he's a complete liability defensively. Like get a guy who's able to be a vertical threat, catch lobs, be an interior presence, while also not being a complete liability defensively. Do you think that he could possibly fill in that role for the Pistons?
Yeah, I think if you were to draft Duren, I would be hesitant to see where Bagley returns to the team, frankly. I think Duren's going to come in like a year or two's worth of progress ahead of where Andre was. I think he is a little further along. And at that point, you're just, you're going to get the same kind of role threat. He's going to need a while, like I said, to get kind of as clever when it comes to screening as Bagley is. But he's every bit the I don't think you're losing anything on the defensive end, certainly not within a year or two. And Duren's got some experience under his belt. I don't think he can get much worse, frankly. And then he's not as good a post player. I think if you're looking for a guy who can do like isolation post up stuff, Bagley's still a much better player at that particular side of things. But that's, Duren's going to mash a switch if he needs to. That's not something I care much about going to. So I think there's some pretty heavy overlap there. But still, like the archetype fits, right? The archetype fits in a lineup no matter what, right? You need somebody to eat up 15 to 25 minutes in a basketball game. Having a roll threat and drop big in there is as good as anything.
All right, so I'll leave it off with this. I just want to ask you, do you think that if you, obviously none of us are in Troy Reaver's draft room, we don't know what's going on in there, but from the outside point of view, would you guess that he's probably somewhere higher up on their boards if they were to get another mid-round pick? Do you think he's someone that they would be targeting? If you had to put money on it,
I think he's on the board. I wouldn't think they've ruled him out. I can't say where they are. I mean, Troy's love for Bagley, I mean, like that, if he's letting that change how he decides about draft picks, there could be all sorts of things on the board because he's not going to want to draft any of those, 4-5s. That it's all a question of Troy. But I don't think I don't think Duren has anything about him that would turn Weaver away from him as a prospect. I think he's very much in play, especially for a second pick.
Yeah, so I really like what I've seen and from what I've watched and what I've read about him. I really like Duren. I think he would be a good person to target with a second pick if they were to get one, depending where that pick is. Like, for example, we'll talk about this later in the episode, but if they were able to get 7 or something, I'd rather them go Murray and Sharp. Like, that's like where I'm going with that. But if they were to get like a teams one and Duren was still there, I'd like him to be drafted. But this is what brings the question to, though, is that now you're going to have a packed big man room. If you bring back Bagley, like you're saying, but they may not bring back Bagley, is what I'm saying that you just said. But if they do, you got him, Bagley, Stu, and then it sounds like they're going after another big in free agency, that they're going to be going after DeAndre Ayton. They could be going after, I've seen their names linked to Mo Bamba. I've seen their names linked to Mitchell Robinson. So you could be looking at a really stacked big man room that doesn't really fit together. So I wonder if that is going to play a part in, I think it has to play a part in who they end up wanting to pick with that second. if they get a second first overall pick, how confident they feel in their ability to actually be getting DeAndre Ayton. But yeah, Jalen Duren, I really like him. I think he could possibly be a target if they get a second pick, but we'll see what happens. When we come back, I want to talk with Hal about some of these teams, some possible teams the Pistons could be making trades with in this little late lottery area, mid-first round pick. Heck, there's one team I actually think the Pistons could make a deal with that's in the early 20s. We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, I have to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, Arcade 1-Up. We have big news. The one, the only, NBA Jam is back. Arcade 1-Up, the leader in at-home retro arcade games, is not only bringing the best game ever back, but they've made it bigger than ever before. And wait for it, Shaq Edition Machine. Jump clear across the court and set the ball on fire in one of the first sports games ever to feature a real and digitized NBA licensed teams. No fouls, no free throws, and no quarters required. Compete with friends and family through all new Wi-Fi leaderboards, making you more connected than ever. Pre-order now from arcade1up.com. That's arcade, the number one up.com for an estimated early September ship date. Arcade 1-Up is the place for fun. They got even more classics like Golden Tee and my favorite Mortal Kombat, and many others start at just $399. And check this out. They're giving away an NBA JAM Shaq edition to a Locked On listener. Enter for a chance to win a game console for your man cave at arcade1up.com/lockedon. That's arcade, the number one, up.com/lockedon. You've got till July 8th to enter to win NBA JAM Shaq edition console. Don't miss out and enter today. Who are you going to play with at Arcade 1-Up? So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. It's the best way to support the podcast. You guys get all that on the road to 3,000 subscribers, yada, 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 all that good stuff. All right, Hal, let's go ahead and get into some trades. Now, I've talked about multiple teams that I think the Pistons could be possibly making deals with on draft night, maybe before draft night. We just had our first trade happen with OKC. And now I'm drawing a blank. Who was it? Okay. Oh, in Denver. So we just had our first trade happen that involved some draft picks. I didn't even know that you could be making trades right now. I'm not going to lie. But here we go. It's starting. Let's talk about some teams that I think the Pistons could be working with. And we're going to run down them, and I want to see what your thoughts are. So obviously, the one that everyone's been talking about, the most popular one, I think you know where I'm going here, is Portland's number 7. I want to ask you, though, because I had the Portland Locked On Blazers guy, and you guys, I kid you not, the fruit fly that I've told you guys about that brings out the boxing gloves every time I start recording is back again. I swear to God, dude, I don't get it. He doesn't come out any other time, but anytime I start recording, man, this guy comes out ready to 1v1 me. I don't understand what happens. Anyways, Hal, number 7 overall pick for the Portland Trail Blazers. I had the Locked On Blazers guy on the podcast, and he said that he doesn't believe the Blazers would do it. He doesn't think the Blazers should do it. Doesn't think it's equal value. From what I've heard and from I understand, I think Portland's going to have a couple other guys that they'd rather trade that number 7 overall pick for, and Jerami's probably not their number 1 or number 2 option with that pick. Do you think, though, trying to be as unbiased as you possibly can, do you think that number 7 overall pick is equal value for Jerami, or do you think the Pistons are barking, they're reaching too high here?
I think it's absolutely something that should be in play. I think that's a trade where if you're making it, you're a team that's going to take money back, right? You're gonna it's Jerami's not the best asset in that trade, but this is definitely a draft where I feel like the 7 is not nearly as valuable as it will be in some other drafts. The players that Portland are going to get there aren't going to be immediate contributors probably for them. They're under some pressure from Dame. I don't see the player, in that area where they're going to feel like, oh God, we missed out on this because we paid Jerami a reasonable contract and stuff like that. It would be something that, like, it's very clearly a win now move, but I don't think it's a win now risk in any way for them. And I it feels like a lot, but when you get to the draft itself, and the lottery's already done and you end up with 7 in a slightly weaker draft, that value isn't necessarily the same as it is, 7 before the lottery, right? 7, in certain situations, the nebulous value of what a pick could be is a lot higher than what it actually is in the cold light of draft day. So if the wrong guy doesn't fall and you're sitting there, on draft night and somebody makes you that offer, I can see it happening. I don't know that I would say it's likely, but I don't think it's unfair or anything like that.
All right, so real quick before we move on to the next team that I was looking at, John Collins is rumored. I think as of today, actually, it was a rumored report that Atlanta's trying to get another lottery pick, and I believe I can say, from what I understand, he is on the radar for the Portland Trailblazers. Do you think the Trailblazers would rather have John Collins? For me, I think John Collins probably is higher on their list.
He's a weird fit, so that would be a hard one for me to see. Just you need a certain kind of center to play, or a certain kind of other big man to play with him, etc. So I'd say I'd have him probably about level with Jerami in terms of value, but Jerami's a much easier piece for me to see fitting in, just because he's such a, he's there's no complication to fitting Jerami into a lineup in any of a couple different ways.
All right, fair enough. I've told you guys before, I think that Portland is going to end up with Jerami, even though I have some questions about whether it's just going to be for the 7th overall pick, but it sounds like Portland really wants to try to get Jerami, and I think that right now they're the team that's probably most aggressive for him. So I think that's the trade that's probably at the most likely to happen right now. But I have some other ones I want to ask you about, Hal. So next one I want to skip to is OKC at 12. So OKC, it sounds like, might be trying to get like a veteran possibly to help them start to try to resemble a competitive team somewhat, maybe not purposely suck the entire year and then sit players for 2 months. Okay, so if they do want to trade that number 12 pick and they're interested in Jerami Grant, do you think that I'm tripping over my words right now. Would you think that OKC would be interested in trading that number 12 pick for Jerami Grant? Do you think that would be equal value for not only OKC, but the Detroit Pistons?
I think that 12 to 15 range is a pretty comfortable ask for Jerami Grant.
All right, so let me ask you this. If you had to match contracts, because obviously you can't just trade number 12 for Jerami Grant, it just wouldn't work. Would you take 12 and Derek Favors for Jerami Grant?
Well, I think you can pre-draft, right? If they need the cap space to absorb it, they can't go over the cap for it. But if they've got the space, and I haven't checked if they do, but if they've got the space, you can make that trade. They just have to have it clear basically by the time the cap locks in.
All right.
So that's possible. I would take a little bit of money back though to make it work.
Okay, so if it was Derek Favors, would you take him on?
What's Derek Favors' contract right now?
He got 1 year, $10.1 million left.
Sure, probably.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so the next one I got is Charlotte, and this one I've talked about with the listeners on here many, many times. I don't know if you've probably seen this one float around on Twitter a little bit, but it's 13. So I have two different ones. 13 and 15 and Gordon Hayward for Jerami Grant. Would you do that? And do you think that's fair value for both sides?
And Gordon's got 2 years left now. Is that
Correct.
My understanding? Yeah. So
Correct.
I would be okay with this. I think Gordon Hayward's like a pretty good player still. You're kind of pushing your cap out a year. So that probably makes your your push for Ayton much harder at that point, because you're taking on like $35 million, something like that. But yeah, I think he's the kind of good vet that can like take a load off Cade and just generally play with the team and give you a lot of flexible options. And then I think that's again good pick value for Jerami. So I'd be pretty fine with that.
Okay, now I've already given you guys my argument for why I would do that trade. So just to give you a brief summary before I tell them the second one. My brief summary of why I take that trade is 13-15. I think getting two basically lottery picks is really good value for Jerami. And Gordon Hayward, when he's healthy, is a really good player still. He would take pressure off Cade. He can space the floor. He can take some of that offensive pressure off of Cade, and he really make this team better. And if he is not able to stay on the court and he's not able to stay healthy, then then you just play the young guys that you drafted and you continue to rebuild. And then at some point next year, if he's an expiring contract, you could possibly move him if a team likes to take a chance on a guy who, when he's on the court, is really healthy. Maybe a contender is more willing to take something like that. And if he is staying on the court and he's playing really well and he has been healthy, then I think he becomes a pretty valuable player that some contenders would want to have. So I think it's really a win-win situation. Even if he doesn't stay on the court, he only has 2 years left on his deal. If he doesn't end up playing or a lot of games, you can just play your young guys that you ended up drafting. And he's not going to, I don't think he would block minutes for anybody. It's not like he's going to be demanding 40 minutes on a rebuilding team. I don't think he'd be blocking anything. So I think it's a win-win for them.
I think you'd still have the ability to go after a max player next year as long as you manage your cap right. So you're still being able to take advantage of the next summer's free agency if you want it.
Correct. All right, so real quick before we move on to the next team, my second one was just 13 and Hayward. Would that still be good enough, or do you need both to take on his contract?
Oh, I'd probably do it with just the one pick if I had to. Yeah, I might ask for like a little more monetary balance. Like, will you take some money off our books? Can you take Kojo or something like that? Just to make it a little more even. But I think both picks is probably asking a bit too much, to be frank.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'd also take 13 in Hayward. That's where I'm at with it as well. All right, so we're running a little bit longer than I thought, so I'm going to try to hurry up and get these teams in as quick as possible.
That's always how this works.
It always happens, dude. It always happens. All right, so the next team I'm looking at is Atlanta is 16. Now, there's a trade that I've floated around the podcast that I've actually become a pretty big fan of. I actually really would like this trade to happen, if I want to be honest. But I'm going to give you a different one first.
A different one?
I have two different ones. I have two ones because I think these both are possible. So 16 and Gallinari. Would you take that? With me and Hal talked about this before we started recording. If I'm wrong about this, we're going to have Keith Smith, who is the salary cap expert. He does all kinds of work over at Spotrac, whatever. So I'm gonna have him on to tell me if this is wrong or not. But from what I understand, I've looked multiple times places and I haven't heard nothing different. But you can release Danilo Gallinari after you trade him, and he's only going to be guaranteed $5 million. Now, if you can't do that, he's on the books for one more year with $20 million. So are you trading for Danilo Gallinari in 16 if it's offered to you for Jerami Grant?
This is the one you do if you have like really good vibes about getting Ayton, that kind of thing, right? You have a plan and you've gotten good response from your agents that free agency has some options for you, and you just need to clear $15 million in cap space. I like your other trade that you're about to go through better, though.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let's go ahead and get to it then. All right. So this one right here, which I was met with very mixed reviews on this trade, like very mixed reviews. Either you guys loved it, or you guys were in here telling me how stupid I was and how why would we want him, blah blah. So which tells me it's a good trade. When that kind of thing happens, when you get crazy highs from both ends, that means it's somewhere in the middle and it's probably a fair trade. So that's why
that means everything I've ever said has been perfectly correct. That's what you're telling me.
All right, so this next one is Jerami Grant for the 16th pick and Bogdan Bogdanovic. Would you take this trade?
Yeah, I like Bogdan quite a bit. I think he's just like the perfect complementary guard, the kind of guy that can step back into a sixth man role if you end up with someone better, but who can definitely start, who competes on both ends. Probably a little overpaid, but like I'm fine with that right now. And then you're getting what I still think is pretty good pick value for Jerami. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
All right, so you guys have already got a whole podcast of why I would like that trade, but just to give you a brief summary, I basically agree with everything Hal just said. Again, another player I don't believe is going to be blocking minutes for, let's say, Killian or someone else who the Pistons end up drafting. He can come off the bench. He doesn't have to start. But if he does start, I think he's an absolutely amazing fit with Cade. He spaces the floor out. I have a synergy chart up here right now. I told you guys this on the last podcast, but he ranked in the 89th percentile in spot-up opportunities. He's a fantastic offensive player. All jump shots, he ranked in the 66th percentile. All jump shots off the dribble, he ranked in the 80th percentile. So this guy he's a really good offensive player. In transition, he was in the 76th percentile. He's an average pick-and-roll ball handler. He was in the 82nd percentile in isolation this past year. Now, I understand he was hurt, but either way, he brings exactly what you need. Opposite of Cade, spacing the floor, some offensive burden. If you don't want to start him, you can back him up. He doesn't have to play a ton of minutes. He's only averaged 29 minutes over the last few years. And you're getting the 16th pick. So I don't believe he's a negative asset really to begin with. So you're getting a good player and a pick. So I think that actually would be a fantastic trade. I've said that to you guys multiple times on here. I can't wait to see the crazy mixed reactions we get in the comment section.
And I'm kind of surprised people are that out on him, because he's the kind of guy that Detroit fans tend to fall in love with, right? Super intense competitor, the kind of guy who like very much modeled his game after Kobe, right? Really wanted to be Kobe. So he's got that mentality thing. I think people would fall in love with Bogey pretty quick.
Yeah, I agree with you, and also he's just a really good damn player. He may be slightly, he might be like you say, he might be slightly overpaid, but he's not one of those players who's just so overpaid and he's not good. You're like, oh, I don't want that contract. Like, he's a contract that you're okay having because he's a good player. So, is what it is. When we come back, though, I'll ask Hal about one more trade, and then I'm going to ask him about some other low-key prospects that are under the radar that the Pistons could be interested in if they get one of these mid-round picks. But first, I have to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's not impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. Why endure often pointless and seemingly intimidating questioning like it's an Odyssey and LX, and wait while the person behind the counter orders the part on their computer, choosing the only brand that their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home or in your pocket by using your phone. You can save time and money when you're using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? For example, a Honda Odyssey fuel pump is $353 from a chain store, but only $216 from Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business that's been doing it for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every single customer, and they have everything that you could possibly need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even a new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to all your auto part needs. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Make sure you write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support the podcast. On the road to 3,000 subscribers. You guys get all of that, whatever. All right, so I want to tell you about one more team, and then we can move on to some lower key or under the radar prospects here. Not only is it one more team, it's one more player. Because I've had some listeners say, "Why are you always talking about Jerami Grant being traded? Is what you're always talking about it?" Well, it's like the main topic of the offseason. It's like the main thing we're all waiting to see what happens there.
Have you watched any Pistons games recently? I haven't.
Yeah, it's like the main thing that whether they decide to keep him or trade him, it's the main thing that everyone needs to know, so we really get an idea of where this offseason is going. So that's why. But recently, I realized there is another player I feel like could be just as likely to be traded, and that's potentially Kelly Olynyk. Do you think Kelly Olynyk could possibly be moved for one of these mid-round, late-round picks in the first round? Do you think he's worth that, or do you think that's a little bit too much?
It's probably too high for Kelly, especially coming off the season he had. If he were a little healthier and had a better season, maybe you could convince me later in the first round. The teens has probably never really been his range, even in his better days.
All right, so here's a team that I have an offer for, or I want to hear your idea about offering them something. It's the Memphis Grizzlies at 22. Now, I've told you guys multiple times, the Locked On Ultimate Mock Draft, I tried trading Jerami Grant as hard as possible. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys this now. Every team that I've brought up on this podcast right now, I offered them a trade for him. They all told me no and basically laughed at me. So take that for what you will. But anyways, so this is a trade that I don't think I would take. I don't know if I would take it. Maybe I would. I need to think about it more. But this was the offer that was being talked about between me and the Locked On Grizzlies host. I want to get your idea on, or your thoughts on this, Hal. So I was talking to him about possibly trading Jerami Grant, and he told me that his offer to us would be the number 22 pick in Dillon Brooks. Would you do that trade?
For Jerami?
Yes.
That's about as low as I'd want to go. Probably not. I'm not a huge Dillon Brooks guy, but it's also kind of personal. I don't love dirty, cheap players, and he's the kind of guy that just kind of exhausts me when I watch him. So that may be factoring into it a little bit.
So where I was with it, I also was going to say no, because I think that's like you said, that's like you're bordering on the lowest I would possibly want to go with Jerami. And at that point, I'd rather just hold on to him and wait for something else. Now, something I mentioned on the podcast a few weeks ago was possibly going after Memphis is 22 and 29, and then possibly package like Kyle Anderson, and then I'd think about it a little bit more. And I might make that trade. But 22 in books, couldn't do it, and that's why talks fell through with me and the Lockdown Grizzlies host right there. Another team that shot me down and trying to make a trade for Jerami Grant of the handful of teams I tried making trades with. But Kelly Olynyk, do you think that he would be? Do you think he'd be useful to any of these teams I'm about to mention to you right here? Denver, Memphis, Golden State, Miami, or Dallas? Do you think he'd be useful for any of those guys?
Golden State makes the best use out of everyone. It doesn't matter what kind of player you are. When you play with Steph Curry, you look great. So there's that. I think Dallas is another easy one where if they wanted to change things up, he'd work. I don't think there's a team out there, right? When you talk about contenders, and people in the playoffs, I don't think any of them are going to give you like first round value. Maybe the kind of like the 2 seconds value, taking on some money back. But I think they'd all be willing to listen.
All right, fair enough. I just want to get your thoughts on that real quick. All right, so what are some under the radar prospects? If the Pistons do acquire one of these mid round picks, they get somewhere between 10 and 18, or even if they get as high as 7. I think a lot of us are aware of the kind of scenario where the Pistons could possibly get Keegan Murray at 5, and then like Shan Sharp or Mathurin possibly at 7, somewhere around there. But outside the main guys that we've been talking about, what are some like under the radar picks? And if you say Dyson Daniels, I might have to end the podcast.
Hey, I like Dyson Daniels. Dyson Daniels is a good player. I think if you are looking for like the one, like let's say you take Keegan Murray in the first pick and you're looking at something in like the 15 range and you're looking for that like upside swing, I think the name you might look at is a guy like Ousmane Dieng, who's a French player, played in New Zealand. And he's kind of like the 6'9", like 185 pound, like the Kevin Durant is obviously like a ridiculous comparison, but that's the kind of like archetype you're talking about, right? The stick figure that shoots a lot, or the who's the guy that went to the Grizzlies last year out of Stanford, Zaire Williams, right? That kind of player is what you're talking about, right? Where if they develop the physicality, they could be really fun, kind of a Lewis King type thing. There's guys like Ty Washington in that like just after the lottery range, where just kind of you're not quite a point guard who does everything pretty well. I'm a pretty big fan of Nikola Jovic, who's a Serbian guy who's like 6'10" and shoots really well. Kind of everything that you want to pair next to basically any center. If Duren isn't there, then a guy like Mark Williams, right? Just your big, tall center makes a lot of sense. I was a big fan of a kid named Jalen Williams out of Santa Clara. And earlier in the year, I was able to get him in like mock drafts as like, this is the undrafted free agent that I'd target. And now he's like in the lottery range for some people. He's kind of the like Sadiq Bey this year, right? Just the kind of crafty, slow playmaking wing that can shoot and kind of has some sneaky athleticism. And then also one of my favorite players in the draft is the other Jalen Williams. This one, a forward out of Arkansas that is kind of like Al Horford-y. And I really enjoy both the Jalen Williamses.
All right, fair enough. There's some names for you guys to be looking into. We'll possibly dive into them. A few of those prospects in the next 10 days before the draft. Try to get a little bit more deeper with those guys. But those are some names that you guys can be thinking about if the Pistons do pull off a possible trade to get another first-round pick. Hal, we're going to wrap up the podcast, but I want to end it with it might be 2 or 3 questions. Just real quick.
It's always something else.
It's like 2 or 3 rapid-fire questions just to have some fun real quick.
All right,
so
5 minutes each.
Yeah. What if the Pistons were to draft Shaedon Sharpe? which is where I'm at, which I don't think they are. I think it's quite clear that he's not even on their board. It sounds like the three guys that all we hear about is Murray, Ivy, Mathurin. So I don't think Sharp is happening, but I still want it to happen. If they did draft him, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? Or how actually, let me not say happy. How
like
pleased are you?
Like an 8. I'm pretty ready to take a swing. I think this is, if you're ever in a position where you can eat a mistake, it's right now. You will never have another chance to take that swing. Not mainly lucky in the lottery moving forward, right? You're not, unless you're the team that has the 13th pick and you win the lottery. You're never going to get a chance to swing on a talent like that ever again. I shouldn't say ever again, but like not this cycle, right? So if you're looking for that one guy that you need to pair with Cade, and I'm very willing to take a gamble right now. I can get a Keegan Murray or something in free agency. So I can pay for players like that. I can't pay for a Shaedon Sharpe if he hits.
I want everyone to listen to what Hal just said, because that's why that's literally exactly why I said to everybody when they asked me, "Cool, why don't you like Keegan Murray? Why aren't you?" Because I can go get Keegan Murray in free agency. I can get a Cam Johnson in free. I can get that in free agency.
And that doesn't mean they're bad either.
No, they're not bad. They're not bad.
They're really good players. They just aren't. Like I need the guy that could be Devin Booker. I need the guy that could be Bradley.
Yeah, you can't just go get those. You can't just go get those.
You can't go get those. This is how you get those guys.
Yep. So that's why I want Shaedon Sharpe, and I hope somehow, some way that he ends up on the Pistons. But I can envision him going to the San Antonio Spurs and becoming a superstar, and me being pissed off just for years. But either way, all right. So that's the first fun question I want to ask you. Second fun question is, right now, June 13th, when we're recording this, if you had, and you don't chicken out of this, do not give me the quarterback answer here.
Oh no.
If you had to predict right now how the Pistons draft night goes, what do you think happens? And that includes who you think they pick at 5. Do you think they end up getting a pick outside that number 5 pick? And who do you think they take with it? Just give me your predictions. Or you could say they only stay with 5 and end up not being able to get another first. What do you, if you had to guess now?
Say I can almost guarantee there's going to be movement on draft night. It just feels there's a lot of noise about them talking with various teams. They were talking with Jerami. We've had movement on draft night before. I'm pretty confident. Not reporting anything, obviously. I don't have any sources, but I'm pretty confident that there will be movement on draft night. I'll say even back into the first round just to make it fun. I have no idea who they're going to pick.
What about 5?
Troy Weaver is crazy.
No, you have to give us an answer at 5. You have to give us an answer at 5. Who do you think is the pick at 5 right now? If you had to take a guess.
Crazy talk. Paolo falls, and we land Paolo.
No. So we're not. No, you can't do no crazy stuff like that.
Why not?
Because Paolo's not falling, man. It's not happening, dude. Just go ahead and say Keegan Murray.
Let me believe. Cool. Let me believe. I don't want to say Keegan. That's gross.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, dude. That's what I'm saying. But we both know that's what's going to happen. We both know that's where it's happening.
I don't want to let that in my heart for right now. We're not doing that.
So everyone, Keegan Murray's
vibes
answer.
only.
That's all that. That's Keegan Murray's answer. That's all you guys need to know about that. And then the final question that we have for Hal before we wrap up the podcast: who's winning the championship, Hal? Before we record, there's an hour to go until Game 5. That's in Golden State. Who do you think's winning the championship?
Right now, I want to lean Golden State just a little bit. It's a really good Celtics team, though.
Fair enough.
Draymond needs to like not be what he has been for the last 2 games, because you can't have Steph score 50 every game. But the way Steph's playing, he might score 50 every game.
If he did, I'd be extremely happy.
This is very much a Steph deserves Finals MVP. I don't care who wins kind of series.
Yeah, I've been seeing talk about that, so we'll see if he actually gets votes if they lose like LeBron did in 15.
Maybe we've learned our lesson.
I don't want to get Hal on a tangent here. I see him getting ready for it.
Give me Andre Iguodala.
All right, so that's all we've got for you today, man. Appreciate you, Hal, for coming on, man. Let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter and find your podcast.
The Busted Header, hopefully everywhere you listen to podcasts, and obviously at Halbridius. If you're on YouTube, you can see it on the screen there.
All right. Thank you, Hal, for coming on, man. I appreciate you, man. We're probably going to have you on. I'm going to take a guess. I'll probably have you on one more time before
anytime
time. So Appreciate you, man. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to our YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support the podcast. Make sure you guys are making Locked On NBA Big Board your second listen of every single day. Host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and author of the Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leaf Doolin, giving fans an in-depth look at the NBA draft, mock draft, players' rankings, and of course the big boards. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Enjoy this finals game. You guys will be listening to it after the game actually took place. So hopefully you guys are rooting for the Warriors and the Warriors won. And hopefully you guys took the BetOnline money line that I told you guys to go ahead and do. If you didn't, you guys are going to miss out again. But until the next podcast, I'll see you guys later. Peace out, everybody. Have fun. I'll see you later.